Got it, ready for your next instruction. She told me she wanted a break while wearing the sweater I bought her for our 3rd anniversary. The one with the tiny rip in the sleeve she never fixed because it made it hers. I still remember that detail because I was looking at that frayed cuff when she said it. I need to know if what we have is real, Rachel said, like she was pitching a business idea, not dismantling our 10-year relationship. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, eyes sharp, voice rehearsed. There was no anger in her tone, no tears, just this unsettling gleam of control, like she was already proud of how she'd delivered the line. A break, she said, just for a month. No contact. The word test hung in the air like an open wound. I stared at her, my coat still slung over my arm from work. Is this a breakup or a test? I asked flatly, already knowing the answer. If it were a breakup, she smiled, I'd say goodbye. I remember blinking once, slowly, then setting the coat on the chair. Okay, I said. You'll get your answer. She opened her mouth, maybe to clarify, soften, backtrack. Who knows? I didn't wait. I picked up my keys and walked out the front door. Not slamming it, not stomping, just gone. The strange part? I didn't feel panic. No earthquake in the chest, no adrenaline spike. Just an eerie stillness, like someone turned off the noise in my head. It's a feeling men don't talk about enough. When love doesn't die with fire, but frost. I drove to the grocery store, bought a cheap prepaid phone, sat in my car for an hour just deleting things. Shared accounts, calendar invites, cloud backups. I wasn't deleting her. I was deleting her access. Some of you are probably yelling at your screen right now, thinking I should have said more, fought back, begged. But here's the thing, Rachel didn't want honesty. She wanted theater. And I don't do auditions. By the time she texted me the next morning, something light and smug like, hope you slept okay in your dramatic flounce. I had already checked into a short-term rental under my brother's name. 1 bedroom, clean, quiet, a mirror that didn't show her shampoo bottles beside mine. And while I have your attention, if you're listening and still not subscribed, you're part of the 97% who enjoy the story but never hit the button. Come on. It's free, and it actually helps the team keep making these the way you like them. You listening helps, but your subscribe makes it real. Back to Rachel. She assumed I was sulking, that I'd cave in 2 days, post something sad and cryptic, drunk text her at midnight, that I'd orbit around her like every man before me. But I didn't move closer. I vanished. No social media. No mutual friends reached out. And I sure as hell didn't answer the door when she came by 3 days later, standing on the porch like a missionary selling salvation. I watched her through the peephole. She looked confused. Knocked once. Then again. Then just stood there for a while, arms folded. I didn't move. She left eventually, muttering something I couldn't hear. Probably rehearsing the story she'd tell her friends about how he's being so dramatic. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was being done. You see, there's a thing about these so-called loyalty tests. They're always designed to make you prove something to the one administering them. Chase me. Beg me. Fight for me. Prove I matter. What Rachel didn't realize is that when you test a man who's quietly been watching you fall out of love with him for months, who's counted the nights you came home emotionally absent, clocked the fake smiles, the sudden gym obsession, the phone always face down, you're not testing loyalty. You're confirming exit velocity. And she just handed me permission to leave. I slept better that night than I had in weeks, maybe months. Because when a woman who once made your heart race turns your gut to stone, you don't fight. You walk. And I did. Rachel's first few days without me looked like a commercial for liberation. She uploaded a selfie with the caption, "Taking time to rediscover myself, crescent moon sparkles." The comments rolled in. Heart emojis, supportive quotes, her friends cheering, "You deserve this, girl." Even her mother liked it. That one stung more than I'll admit. According to her new narrative, I was a man too serious, too closed off, too predictable. The kind of partner who needed a wake-up call. She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. People knew. I became an anecdote, an invisible lesson wrapped in her smiling captions. But Rachel didn't realize I had already begun erasing my digital fingerprints. I didn't deactivate my accounts. I deleted them. Entirely. Gone. Years of posts, photos, tags, all wiped. When she scrolled to check if I'd seen her new post, she got a user not found screen. I imagine her smirk faltering for the first time. At the rental, I moved differently. Woke up early. Quietly. No arguments. No sighs. The silence wasn't heavy, it was clean. I transferred what savings I had into an account under my brother's name, then contacted the landlord to remove myself from the lease. No drama, just logistics. Meanwhile, she was busy rewriting history. Mark just needs to process, she told her best friend, Alyssa, during brunch. He's always been emotional under the surface. He'll come around. Alyssa, who's less gullible than most, frowned. You sure he sees this as a test and not, the end? Rachel waved it off, smug. He knows me. That sentence kept echoing in my head long after she said it. He knows me. The kind of arrogance that comes from someone who's never been left before. Someone who believes love makes you permanent. But she was wrong. I did know her too well. I knew how she would handle her little experiment. How she'd talk about growth and boundaries while scrolling through dating apps, calling it harmless curiosity. How she'd flirt with a coworker for validation, then convince herself it doesn't count. I'd seen it in her eyes weeks before the talk on the couch. She wasn't searching for clarity. She was searching for an alibi. I spent my evenings packing boxes of the life we shared. I labeled each one by emotion. Nostalgia, disappointment, closure. It sounds ridiculous, but it helped. There was one object I couldn't categorize. The ceramic mug she made in her pottery class. Crooked handle, pale blue glaze. She used to call it her thinking mug. She'd hold it during our late-night talks about the future, about maybe having kids, about building something that lasted. I almost left it behind. But then I remembered her words. Just for a month. No contact. A test. So I left the mug on the kitchen counter of the old apartment, handle cracked, empty. A symbol. The next morning, I forwarded the final notice to the landlord and turned in the keys. I didn't look back. Rachel, meanwhile, doubled down. She changed her relationship status to, "It's complicated," started following travel pages, and posted a story of herself holding a cocktail captioned, "Clarity tastes like freedom cocktail glass." I could almost hear the soundtrack in her head. She believed she was starring in some redemption arc where I'd come crawling back to prove my love. But I wasn't writing that story anymore. Every night, my phone stayed silent. No texts, no notifications. Just the hum of a fridge in a small, borrowed apartment and a sense of calm so foreign it felt dangerous. I wasn't waiting for her to call. I was listening for the moment I stopped caring if she did. And somewhere around the end of week 2, I realized silence can be louder than any goodbye. She thought my quiet was a sulk, a tactic. But for me, it was revelation. The more I stayed gone, the clearer everything became. She wanted to test my devotion, but all she'd done was expose hers. And when people like Rachel lose control of the narrative, they don't reflect. They panic. That part was coming soon. By the 3rd week, Rachel started noticing things she hadn't counted on. Silence, for one. Not the petty kind. Not the make him worry type. But the unnerving quiet of someone who'd actually let go. The still breathing? Text she sent on a lazy Wednesday afternoon got delivered. Read. No reply. No little typing bubble. No dots dancing on the screen like he was composing something dramatic. Just read. She stared at it longer than she meant to, then screenshot it and posted it to her Instagram story with a laughing emoji. When your man takes space too seriously, grinning face with sweat. But the joke didn't land like her usual ones. A few friends reacted with crying laughing faces, one with a fire emoji. But Alyssa? She replied with just, "That doesn't look like a man who's waiting." Rachel brushed it off. Told herself it was fine. That Mark was processing, or trying to prove a point. That he'd text her something poetic soon, maybe even dramatic. She even drafted a few imaginary responses from him in her head. Ones that made her feel powerful. She started wearing her hair differently, bought new earrings, told her friends she was feeling light, that the break was giving her clarity. But every time someone asked, "Have you two talked yet?" she gave the same tight smile and said, "Not yet. He's decompressing." But the tension started showing in the cracks. She went back to their cafe, the one tucked behind the bookstore on Myrtle Street where they always sat by the window. She ordered her usual, found her old table empty, and sat facing the street. She didn't realize she was holding her breath until the door opened and a guy walked in wearing a gray jacket that looked just enough like Mark's to fool her from the corner of her eye. The barista, Anna, who knew them both, smiled as she prepped 2 drinks. One of them, a large Americano with a splash of oat milk and a single packet of raw sugar, used to be Mark's. Rachel felt her throat tighten as Anna handed it off to the man. He smiled, nodded, and left. Not Mark. Not even close. But that drink. That damn drink. She sat frozen for a moment, watching the steam fade from the cup across the room. She left in a hurry, barely touching her own chai. That night, she didn't post anything. No bath selfies. No cryptic quotes. No me-time mantras. Just silence. She scrolled back through their old photos, the ones she had privately saved. Him cooking. Her in his hoodie. The one where he made that stupid lopsided pancake and held it up like a trophy. She zoomed in. On his eyes. She never noticed how distant he already looked in that one. She started second-guessing things. Not all at once. Just little flashes. That night he came home quiet after dinner with his brother. The way he didn't react when she forgot their friend's baby shower. The moment he stared at her across the room after she told that joke at his expense in front of her friends. She told herself those were small things. That Mark had always been calm, unbothered, a little too inward. But now that calm felt less like serenity and more like the silence right before a door closes for good. She checked his social media again, still gone. She texted Alyssa. He's being dramatic. Alyssa wrote back. Or maybe he's done. Rachel didn't reply. Instead, she opened the voice memos on her phone and started one. Then deleted it. Then started another. Hey, so, I've been thinking, maybe this whole thing got a little out of hand. Just wanted to see if you're okay. I mean, obviously you are, but whatever. Okay. Delete. Try again. Hi. I miss you. Too soft. Delete. She gave up. And suddenly, everything felt louder. The empty apartment. The unanswered text. The echo of his name on her lips without anywhere to land. She stood in front of the hallway mirror and stared at herself. Same Rachel. Same hair, same eyes. But something in the reflection looked different. Smaller. The test wasn't going the way she imagined. And somewhere, under all the makeup and self-affirmations, she started to feel it. Not guilt. Not yet. Just fear. A creeping dread that this wasn't a phase. That maybe Mark wasn't waiting. Maybe he was done. And the worst part? She had no idea where he'd gone. She wasn't even trying to see anyone that day. Just a quick stop for oat milk and blueberries. The kind of mundane errand that used to end with a text to Mark. Anything else we need? She caught herself reaching for her phone out of habit and froze. Old patterns die in silence. She tossed the berries in the cart a little too hard and headed toward the self-checkout. Then she saw him, Aaron. Mark's cousin. The one who always brought weird IPAs to cookouts and called everything a vibe. He was by the produce section, comparing avocados like they held national security secrets. Rachel hesitated, then walked over with a tight-lipped smile. Aaron, she said like nothing was broken. He looked up, blinked. Oh, hey, Rachel. There was a pause. Not long but not warm either. She forced a casual tone. How's your mom? She's good. Another pause. Still thinks you make the best potato salad. That got a genuine laugh out of her. Sounded strange. Rusty. Tell her I'll drop off a batch sometime. He nodded, then glanced at her cart. Oat milk. Still on that train. Huh. She smiled wider. Some of us evolve. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she said, Tell Mark I said hi. Aaron's expression shifted just slightly. Not a flinch, more like a hitch in the gears. He looked at the avocados again. He's good. Rachel tilted her head. Good how? He, just moved, actually. Out of the city. The smile froze on her face. Moved? Yeah. Aaron nodded slowly. Packed up the week you ended things. Didn't waste time. Rachel's voice sharpened. Just slightly. I didn't end anything. It was a break. A mutual one. Aaron raised an eyebrow. That what we're calling it now? I said no contact. She added, like that clarified something. It wasn't a breakup. Aaron didn't argue. He didn't need to. He just shrugged. He took it seriously. She tried to read his face, tried to fish out more. But he was already checking the firmness of a mango like this conversation didn't matter. Rachel stood there, gripping her cart a little too tight. So where'd he go? Didn't say, Aaron replied. Said he wanted air. Space. Whatever word people use when they're tired of being someone's test subject. That landed like a slap, even if he didn't mean it that way. Rachel blinked. He said that. Aaron looked up at her. His expression was still casual, but something about his eyes had sharpened. He didn't have to. She couldn't think of anything to say. Aaron smiled faintly, almost politely. Anyway, gotta run. Got a thing. Yeah, of course. She watched him walk away down the frozen food aisle, feeling like the room had tilted slightly under her feet. Packed up the week you ended things. That line kept repeating in her head. I didn't end anything. But the more she said it, even internally, the hollower it sounded. She thought she was directing a scene, orchestrating a grand, emotional beat where Mark would prove himself by refusing to walk away. But instead, he walked. And now her own version of events, her tidy, curated timeline, was cracking at the seams. She opened Instagram on her phone, checked her old posts, reread her own caption. Sometimes space is love in disguise. And for the first time, she realized how stupid it sounded. Love in disguise. What she didn't realize was that the disguise wasn't on love. It was on her. And Mark saw through it the moment she said, "Just a break." She abandoned the cart right there in the store. Walked out to her car. She sat behind the wheel, engine off, staring at her own reflection in the dark screen of the dashboard. It didn't matter what her intentions were. He was gone. And the only person who seemed surprised by that was her. She didn't mean to drive past the old apartment. Not really. She told herself it was on the way to the dry cleaners, even though it wasn't. She took the long route, turned down the street slow, like her GPS had glitched and brought her there by accident. But there it was, Unit 2B, the place where they lived for almost 5 years. The place where they had a plant that never stopped dying and a kitchen drawer that never closed right. Only now it was empty. The blinds were gone. So were the chairs. The sticker he'd put on the window that said, "No soliciting unless you have tacos," peeled off. Her first thought wasn't shock. It was irritation. He didn't even tell me he was moving out? Then came the second thought. The quieter one. The one she tried to ignore. Maybe he didn't think he had to. She parked across the street and stared at the door, waiting for, what? Him to walk out with groceries? A light to flick on? Nothing. Just that hollow stillness buildings get when all the life has been vacuumed out. She finally pulled her phone out and called his old job. A receptionist answered, cheerful and oblivious. "Hi. I'm trying to reach Mark Whitaker." "Oh," the receptionist replied. "He's no longer with us." "Sorry." Rachel blinked. "I thought he just took a leave?" "Nope. Full resignation. Left about a week and a half ago. No forwarding info." Rachel's lips parted. "Do you know where he—" "Sorry, we can't give out employee information. Company policy. Have a good day." Click. She stared at the call screen, then opened her contacts and tapped on his brother's name. Straight to voicemail. She called again. And again. Third time it rang once, then voicemail. No callback. No text. Her mouth went dry. Rachel stepped out of the car and walked up to the building's main entrance. The buzzer still had their last name on it. Barely. A piece of tape peeled off, curling like it was embarrassed to still be there. She tried the door. Locked. She peered through the window, could see the familiar layout of the lobby, now stripped. The shelf where Mark used to toss his keys? Gone. The spot where they hung the crooked mirror she always meant to fix? Empty. The whole place looked like someone had walked out without bothering to explain why. Rachel backed away and sat on the steps. Her legs were shaking. Not from heartbreak. Not yet. From something worse. Recognition. This wasn't a break anymore. This wasn't a romantic movie where the guy shows up with flowers and some cheesy line like, "I had to lose you to realize I couldn't." This was the part where the credits roll and he doesn't come back. She opened their shared email, empty. The vacation plans they'd made months ago? Cancelled. The calendar he used for work reminders? Deleted. Even the Spotify account they once shared, he'd logged her out. One by one, all the threads connecting them were quietly, efficiently cut. She thought back to the day she suggested the break. How sure she was that it would reset things, make him see her as irreplaceable. She thought he'd resist. Instead, he'd vanished. Not out of spite. Not in anger. Just gone. And for the first time since this all began, Rachel sat with the reality that she'd miscalculated something fundamental. He hadn't waited. He hadn't hesitated. He'd left like a man who'd already stayed too long. And the worst part? She couldn't even blame him. She sat in her car until the sun dipped low and the streetlights flickered on. Hours. Watching a door that would never open again. She kept telling herself she'd leave soon. She never did. The door didn't open. He didn't appear. No dramatic scene. No final argument. Just absence. Heavy and clean. Rachel rested her head against the steering wheel and whispered to no one, "What the hell did I do?" She still didn't know the answer, but she was starting to understand the cost. Rachel gave it another week. Not because she was trying to be strong, but because she needed the delay to convince herself it wasn't desperation. She rehearsed texts in her head like they were closing statements in a courtroom. Witty, humble, casual, nothing too heavy, no guilt, no begging, just a tone that said, "I'm still in control. I just miss you a little." She settled on, "Okay, you win. Let's talk?" Relieved face, playful, disarming. The emoji made it seem light, like he'd chuckle, like he'd remember she was fun, remember that she was the kind of woman worth forgiving. She sent it, marked as delivered. Then, nothing. Not even the courtesy of a read. She waited 2 hours, checked her phone every 10 minutes, switched it to airplane mode, back again in case the network was glitching. By sunset, the silence grew unbearable, so she made her next move flowers. Not red roses, too cliché. Not lilies, too funereal. She chose a minimalist white arrangement with eucalyptus and a note that read, "No drama. Just us. Let's reset. R." She sent them to his brother's office. She knew the receptionist would sign for them. She always did during the holidays. Rachel even pictured the front desk, the smiling woman who once said she and Mark looked unshakable. But this time, the delivery service emailed her back. The package had been returned. Unopened. No signature. No one accepted it. Rachel sat in her kitchen, staring at the rejection notice like it was a death certificate. This wasn't just avoidance. This was intentional. She went from defensive to determined. The next morning, she drove to the one place she was sure she'd be acknowledged. His mother's house. A safe bet. Mark's mom always liked her. She used to call Rachel my second daughter at family dinners. They'd send each other texts about recipes. Shared memes about bad dates before Mark. She arrived just after 10. The driveway was empty, the curtains drawn. She rang the bell once. Waited. Twice. Still nothing. She stepped back, unsure what to do, and that's when she saw it. On the porch rail, resting precisely in the center like it had been placed for a reason, was a single key. Not just any key. Her key. The one she wore on a silver chain for years. Mark gave it to her when they moved in together. He joked that she had the power to enter his world or lock him out. She recognized the tiny dent near the teeth, the worn edges from where it rubbed against her necklaces. It was unmistakable. Rachel stared at it for a long time. She didn't touch it, didn't move it, just stood there, mouth dry, as her mind tried to solve the riddle that needed no solving. No note, no message, no confrontation, just a gesture so cold, so clean, it cut sharper than any insult. The key wasn't left to invite her in. It was a return, an erasure of permission. She tried texts, gestures, nostalgia. Tried to speak his language without using her voice. Now he'd answered, with finality. All her routes were gone, his phone, his job, his brother, his mother. The people who once connected them had closed ranks like a fortress around him. And she was outside. Rachel returned to her car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. She stared straight ahead, vision blurring. Not with tears. She was too stunned for that. This wasn't a cooling-off period. This wasn't just space. She was on the wrong side of a wall she helped build. And the only door she might still reach was the one he hadn't opened yet. But she had a feeling that if he did, it wouldn't be for her. It arrived on a Wednesday. Plain white envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just slid under her apartment door like a whisper. She spotted it when she got home from work, sitting perfectly square against the welcome mat she never bothered to replace. Inside, a single folded page. Thick stock. No creases except the one made to fit. No Dear Rachel. No signature. Just one sentence, typed in the same font mark used on every list, every email, every sticky note. Meet me where we first argued. It hit her in the chest like déjà vu. Not the words. The memory. The roadside diner off Route 18. They'd driven there 6 years ago on the way to his cousin's wedding. Mark missed an exit. She mocked his inner compass. Turned into something real, sharp, messy. Their first fight. It ended in that booth by the window. She cried into her grilled cheese. He said something about how she always made it sound like he was failing a test she never explained. Then he wiped her face with a napkin and called the whole thing practice. "We're better after this," he said, like stretching before a run. Now that place, that moment was the destination. She stared at the note for a long time, then got in her car. The diner hadn't changed. Still that peeling red trim around the roof. The flickering neon open 24-hour sign. The smell of old grease and burnt coffee that somehow felt familiar. And there he was, Mark, sitting in that same booth. Alone. Coffee in front of him, hands around the mug, calm as if this were a Tuesday ritual. No phone, no distractions, just there. Rachel hovered in the entrance for longer than she meant to. The waitress gave her a side glance, but didn't interrupt. Finally, Rachel walked over. "Mark," she breathed, almost like a question. He looked up, eyes unreadable but not cold. She slid into the booth across from him. He didn't lean forward, didn't smile. "So, this your way of saying it's time?" she asked. He nodded once. "It is," then added, with zero inflection, "just not how you think." Her stomach tightened. He looked good, not overly polished, but grounded. Lighter, like a weight had been lifted she never knew he carried. Rachel forced a smile. "I wasn't sure if you'd ever reach out." "You weren't supposed to be sure," he replied, sipping his coffee. "That was part of the problem." Silence. The waitress approached, menu in hand. Rachel waved it off. She wasn't hungry. Mark didn't speak right away. He let the air sit, thick with anticipation. She finally broke. "Why here?" His eyes met hers, level. "Because it's where I realized something about you. About us." She tried to keep her voice light. "That we can survive conflict?" Mark didn't laugh. "That when you fight to win, not to understand." The line landed with surgical precision. Rachel blinked, unsteady. "Okay. I deserved that. I'm not here for apologies," he said calmly. "Or rehearsals." Her fingers twisted in her lap under the table. She hated how easily he could do this. Stay cool, centered, like he'd already played this scene in his head and moved on. But she tried to control the narrative. Like always. "So what now?" she asked, steady as she could manage. "Closure." Mark leaned back. "Something like that." He reached into the bench beside him, pulled out a manila folder, and placed it gently on the table. She stared at it, didn't touch it. Something in her knew this wasn't a love letter. This wasn't a reconciliation. The tone, the tempo, the damn folder. She expected some kind of emotionally charged scene. A romantic monologue. Maybe even a tearful hug followed by a long drive back toward some new beginning. Instead, she got the terrifying serenity of a man who had already processed her out of his life. She looked at him, trying to find some trace of the boy who once panicked when she cried at a Christmas movie. But he wasn't here for emotions. He was here for the final act. Rachel reached for the folder, hands trembling, and Mark just sat there, sipping his coffee, waiting. Rachel unfolded the flap of the manila folder slowly, like it might bite her. Inside were printed pages, 8 of them neatly clipped. The first line made her heart stall. A timestamp, a text message. From her, to someone named Zach. "He's out of the way. Let's do this." Rachel blinked once, twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something more innocent. Beneath the message was a photo. Her, at the gym, and Zach, shirt off, smug smile, hand resting just a little too casually on the small of her back. They weren't kissing. Nothing graphic. But it wasn't platonic. Not even close. The camera angle said it wasn't a selfie. Someone else took it. Someone with a clear line of sight. She looked up, throat tight. "That was..." Mark held up a hand. "No." The word was flat. Final. She swallowed. "You don't understand what was going on that week." "I understand perfectly. It wasn't, look, nothing happened. Not really. I was just spinning out. I didn't think you'd actually take the break seriously." Mark nodded slowly. "You didn't think I'd take you seriously." His eyes weren't cruel. That's what made it worse. They were steady, disappointed. Rachel rushed to fill the space. "It was a stupid line. I was venting. I never meant it like that. Zach and we weren't." Mark cut in, voice low. "You called it a test. That was your result." She froze. Mark leaned back in the booth, folded his arms. "I didn't snoop. I didn't hire someone. You sent that to a man who has a public Instagram with location tags." You left your old iPad synced to our shared cloud. I didn't look for proof. I stumbled into it. Her mouth opened, closed, because he wasn't wrong. She thought she was clever, playing two games at once. One for attention, the other for distraction. A break with no rules. But rules don't need to be written when they're wired into trust. Rachel's face burned. She looked down at the pages again. Her own words staring back at her like betrayal written in her own handwriting. She whispered, "I didn't sleep with him." Mark gave a slow nod. "Maybe that's true." He let the silence linger before adding, "But I'm not the judge here. I'm the lab rat who passed your test by disappearing." Rachel wanted to cry. She didn't. She looked around the diner, half full, normal, oblivious. The waitress refilled someone's coffee. Two kids giggled in the corner booth. And here she was unraveling. Mark exhaled through his nose. Not with anger. Just release. "I kept waiting for you to say something, to realize what this was turning into. But all I got were selfies, captions about growth, and radio silence. I didn't know how to reach you," she said, too fast. "You never tried," he replied. Rachel reached for the coffee mug in front of her even though it wasn't hers. Her hand shook. "You think this proves I didn't love you?" she asked quietly. "No," Mark said. "It proves you didn't respect me." That hit harder, because it was the one thing she couldn't argue. She could twist timelines, reframe decisions, rationalize emotional lapses. But that text, that photo, they didn't lie. Mark leaned forward just a little, elbows on the table. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not trying to humiliate you. I just needed you to see what I saw. To see how far you wandered from what we were." Rachel's voice was barely audible. "What do you want from me now?" He shook his head. "Nothing." And it wasn't cruelty. It was detachment. Real, terrifying detachment. He reached for the folder, pulled out one more paper, a single page. Not a threat. Not a demand. Just terms. And for the first time in her life, Rachel understood what it meant to fail a test you designed yourself. Mark slid the final page across the table with the same calm precision he once used to pass her a napkin or refill her water. No dramatic flourish. No emphasis. Just paper meeting for Micah. Rachel looked down. Title at the top. Mutual Release Agreement. Her name. His name. One page. Simple language. Joint assets divided evenly. No claims to past purchases. No pursuit of shared accounts. No contact. No post-closure follow-ups. Final paragraph. Both parties acknowledge this agreement as voluntary, irrevocable, and complete. No gray areas. No, we'll see how we feel in 6 months. No back doors. Just a line. And an ending. Her voice came out tight. "You had this drawn up?" Mark nodded. 3 weeks ago. She blinked. "So this whole thing, inviting me here, it wasn't to talk. It was to finish," he said. Rachel's fingers curled on the edge of the table. "We were in a weird place. I didn't know what I was doing." Mark stood slowly, not abruptly, like the conversation was just done. "You created the test," he said. "I accepted the grade." His tone wasn't bitter. It wasn't even cold. It was the tone of someone who stopped needing to be understood. She looked up at him, disbelief creeping through her ribs like cold air through a cracked window. "You're really walking away from all of this? Just like that?" Mark looked down at her. Not with scorn. With silence. And that silence was worse than shouting. Said, "I already left. This is just the paperwork." She reached for the pen beside the document. Picked it up. Her hand hovered. Trembled slightly. This was supposed to be the scene where he cracked. Where he told her he still cared. That he just needed to feel like she wanted him back. Instead, he stood still. Waiting. She could feel her breath catch in her throat. Something about the finality. The absolute way he wasn't giving her anything. Not a speech, not a tear, not even a bitter remark. Was hollowing her out faster than guilt ever could. This wasn't revenge. It was peace. And she wasn't part of it. "I never meant to lose you," she said quietly. "You didn't," Mark replied. "You meant to keep me on standby." She blinked hard, then signed. The pen tip scraped against the page with painful clarity. He reached out, took the document, folded it in half once, then again, and slid it back into the folder without looking at it. "No thank you. No farewell." Rachel swallowed. "So that's it." Mark looked at her for a long second. "I loved you," he said. "But I loved myself more. It just took me too long to remember that." Then he turned. walked out of the diner. Not a glance back, no hesitation. And Rachel? She stayed in that booth, surrounded by the sound of cutlery, coffee cups, low conversations, life moving on around her. She stared at the empty seat across from her, fingers pressed to her lips like they could hold in the flood. But it was too late. She had played her part, wrote the script, directed the scene, and he had walked off the stage before she could say cut. She stepped out of the diner and into the fading afternoon light, expecting, maybe hoping, to see Mark standing near his car, maybe looking down at his keys, waiting for her to catch up, maybe hesitating, just enough to give her something to hold on to. A glance, a pause, something. But he wasn't there. Just empty asphalt. The spot where he had parked was already taken by someone else. Rachel stood in the gravel, stunned by how quiet everything suddenly felt. The wind pulled at the corners of her jacket like it was ushering her away from a place she no longer belonged. She walked to her own car, keys in hand, mind racing nowhere useful. She turned once, one last time. Nothing. He hadn't lingered, hadn't watched her from a distance to see if she cried, hadn't given her the cinematic ending she always assumed life owed her. He'd simply vanished. And for the first time she didn't feel betrayed. She felt erased. Weeks passed. Rachel returned to her routines, or at least the hollow shell of them. Brunches with half-friends who didn't ask real questions. Gym sessions she couldn't focus on. Her phone became both a lifeline and a weapon. Refreshing old texts, rereading what he'd sent, trying to reverse engineer the moment it all slipped. She checked his old social media accounts compulsively. Nothing. No updates. No new photos. No stories. The profiles were there, but scrubbed. No posts. No bio. No trace. It was like he'd never existed. A ghost who had edited himself out of her history with surgical precision. She Googled his name late one night, expecting nothing, and that's when she found it. A new profile, under a variation of his middle name. Barely any followers. No tags. No photos of him. Just one post. A wide shot of a hiking trail, jagged cliffs in the distance, snow still clinging to the edges. The kind of place that looks like it takes weeks to reach and years to forget. Location, Wyoming. The caption read, "Some tests aren't meant to be passed. Just escaped." Rachel stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Her heart didn't break again. It just stopped holding out. No anger. No plea. Just the slow, permanent understanding that she hadn't tested his devotion. She had drafted the manual for his escape, and he'd followed it perfectly. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because somewhere between her games and his silence, he realized he didn't need to prove anything anymore. He didn't block her. He didn't delete her. He just stopped being available to be hurt. And for Rachel, that was worse than punishment. Because he didn't slam the door. He just walked through it quietly, while she was too busy waiting for applause to notice it had closed.